Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We have Marshall Masters with us from YOWUSA.com, and we are going to be discussing the most recent data that is available through different scientific communities on the rise of meteors that have been reported, volcanic activity, earthquakes, pandemics, and an enormous spike in the global population. What could we expect over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and beyond? What will your grandchildren and great-grandchildren be inheriting? This will be discussed, and things that we can do to make a difference with Mr. Masters today at Leak Project. And if you've been following us here at Leak Project, you might have noticed an increase in videos on our channel from satire to serious issues. I've always enjoyed a good cup of coffee in the morning, and over the past few months, the morning coffee has really lost some of its luster, so I started drinking the super tea, and this stuff is just awesome. I've had more energy, the creative juices have been flowing through my mind, and I quit drinking so much coffee. So if you guys are kind of interested in an alternative, maybe you want to cut down on the coffee for health benefits and stuff, I'll check this stuff out. It's getthetea.com. Marshall, it's great to have you with us on the show here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Hey, Rex, I'm good. Always good to be back. I enjoy doing shows with you, and because you just have such a good high standard of integrity, and I really do appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you too, and that means a lot to me. Thank you. If I wasn't doing this here, I'd be doing it somewhere else, like literally at lunchrooms, during break rooms at work, I'd be talking to people about this kind of stuff. So I'd be doing it here or somewhere else. So I just appreciate having all you guys, and I know that we did our first interview a few years ago. And since then, it's opened up a lot of new opportunities for me as well. I've met a lot of people that are friends with you that you've made good connections with, so I appreciate you as well. And you've recently put together a book that is also available for free, too. I mean, on ebook status. It's called Survival Wellness Advocacy, The Big Win. I always like to have a paper book, though, just because I like it in the hands. I like the feeling of the paper, the smell of the fresh paper. And plus, if something does happen where you don't have access to it online, it's right there in front of you. But if you would kind of talk to us a little bit about the work that you recently put together and why you feel it's so important right now in today's day and age.
Well, thank you. The book, Survival Wellness Advocacy and The Big Win, is available both in print and in ebook. And the print edition, you can find it on Amazon. I sell a signed edition directly. And just go to YOWUSA.com and you'll see the link. But also, this one I decided to release in ebook. It's a PDF ebook and designed specifically for that reader environment, and which can also be imported into Kindle readers. And that is absolutely free, and I encourage people to share it with their loved ones and friends. I've really, this year, decided that it's time for me to start pushing into a new direction. I've always, over the years, been ahead of my audience, typically by a year or 2 years. And that's just by virtue of the fact that this is what I do 7 days a week, and have been doing it that way since 2002. And right now, there's a tremendous amount of validation reporting. I'm happy to see that. Validation reporting is, people getting on YouTube talking about earthquakes, volcanoes, meteors, all of these things, which really are very useful, very helpful for those who are just now coming into awareness. What I'm really doing is focusing on the folks who are, they've been in awareness for some time, and now they can see that this is what I call the gathering. This is when people need to start gathering together and saying, okay, it's one thing to sit there and study it to death. It's another thing to do something about it. Because if you're not, if you're not new to the topic, then you run a risk of what I, call becoming a tribulation couch potato. All right. And, you can just start following this stuff, and it's like, a Cheech and Chong movie, ooh, wow, man, check out the earthquakes. And
right.
It's hard to understand that you're really seeing what's affecting you. A lot of times people just view everything that's going on right now, and it's all going ballistic. And they are watching a slow motion train wreck, very long train, and they're mesmerized. And they feel like they're maybe standing on an overpass or on a hill overlooking the tracks. And so they're detached. They're spectators. They're just watching it happen. And they're not understanding that they're in the caboose of that train. And they eventually are going to be wrapped up in mangled steel along with everybody else. And so that is the concern that I have. I see people doing that, and they will keep doing this and doing this and doing this and doing this. I call it catastrophe toking, and it paralyzes them. They're not really sitting there saying, well, what can I do? And this is partly because we are indoctrinated from birth as consumer robots. We define our lives by the things we do not have. We do not have the newest car. We do not have the biggest house. We do not have the most prestigious job. We do not have this. We do not have that. And so what is it? We go do something productive for somebody else or go into credit card debt, whatever we're going to do to take care of those deficiencies, because that's how we measure our lives in terms of deficiencies. What I'm saying to people is that if you can't afford bullets, beans, and bunkers, stop playing the game. It's not about being capable of buying a mountain of beans. It's about being worth your weight in beans. And that is the whole emphasis of everything that I'm trying to do right now in helping people, is to convey to them a simple message. It's not the having of things that is most important. It is the knowing of things that is. All right. And so this is where particularly I see with grandparents who have grandchildren and children living in ground zero areas like Los Angeles. All right. And they're dead. When this thing breaks loose, that's it. And they're in total agony because they're trying to tell their loved ones, just look at the published empirical data. Okay. It's there. YouTube is now the best resource for it. And there's a lot of wonderful blog sites. Mainstream media is corporatist, controlled by the elites. And that whole strategy is, keep them stupid so that they don't do anything. More importantly, keep them confused, because when people are confused, they can't get a good beat on things. And if they can't get a good beat on things, then that justifies doing nothing. All right. And they'll, well, let's just see how it evolves. Let's wait until we cross that bridge. And that naivete, and it's educated naivete, is very, very dangerous. Back in 2004, Sumatra superquake and tsunami killed 250,000 people. And on that day, you had people that watched the water go out to sea, stranding all the fish, and they're sitting there thinking, well, Phyllis, let's get a basket and go get a free lunch. All right. Now, meanwhile, and those are the ones who are dying, the ones with the nice cars, dead animal skins on the wall, nice houses, so forth. All the ones that were seemingly the most intelligent people. So who are the ones that didn't die? Because they're the ones that did all the dying. So who didn't do all the dying? It was the ones that they looked down their nose at, stupid, ignorant natives who sit around the campfire and they hear stories. When the great turtle shakes his back, you need to run to the hilltops because the great turtle is angry. Who cares what the logic is? When the tremors hit, what happened? The ignorant natives, with doing the great turtle hoochie coochie dance, were running uphill screaming, "Feet don't fail me now." And they all survived. And all of the educated people with the money and the cars who know better than anybody else, they drown like rats. Okay? And then a lot of people who lived in coastal areas, knowing those are dangerous areas, they met equal fates. All right? So the simple fact is, in the coming tribulation, am I trying to save everybody? No. Do I feel bad about the fact that 90% of the global population is going to perish? Of course I do. But instead of looking at the 90% that aren't going to make it, I'm looking at the 10% who are. And what can I do to help them, especially if they cannot afford to buy a hill of beans, like good little consumer survivors. You know, what can I do to help them survive? And equally important, what can I do to help them help their loved ones to survive? Even the ones who are telling them, you know, it's all nonsense. I don't want to hear about it. Nothing's going to happen. Denier's mantra. All right. Well, what I'm saying with survival wellness advocacy and the big win, yeah, this book is about making yourself incredibly useful to a survival community. The ones that are going to be able to mobilize quickly are going to be faith-based communities, spiritual-driven survivors. And we're going to know when we have this very last window of opportunity. It's going to be in your face and easy to see. Because, you know, people always say, when am I going to see it with my own two eyes? Those are the people who are going to be in the 90% who die, drown like rats. All right? That's it. If when you say, I want to see it with my own two eyes, you might as well just say, I want to drown to death. I want to die terribly. Thank you. Because the only right question is and 10% of the people are going to ask the right question. That is going to be, am I looking at something with my own two eyes that is a clear and present danger? That's the smart question. Everybody else just says, I want to see it. That's tourism. So what are the tourists going to do? They're going to run to MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and so forth. You know, it was hysterical. We watched Trump a few days ago, gave a conference, and he just humiliated CNN. He called CNN fake news. He's absolutely right. And what you're going to see on these corporatist-controlled news channels is when we see this in the sky, they're going to bring out the experts, and the experts are going to go, it's just going to be an interesting light show. That's all. Don't worry about it.
Can I jump in real quick on that, Marshall?
Pardon?
Can I jump in on that real quick about the light show that you're talking about? Because I see a lot of stuff lately on the mainstream news pointing to Planet 9. And then even Caltech's really pushing how researchers find evidence of a real ninth planet, according to the Caltech papers. Michael Brown, the guy that basically one of the big writers and discoverers of this Planet 9 that talks about it. He's also the same guy that wrote a book called How I Killed Pluto. And all of this subliminally, in my opinion, of the Planet 9. Okay, you can't call it Planet X. You got to call it Planet 9 because Pluto's downgraded. I can see why they downgraded Pluto. I get it. And then at the same time, it almost seems as if this is orchestrated at a certain level to cause a disassociation. There was an article that I read the other day that said a star is heading towards us, and it made it sound like the end of the world was going to happen because the star is heading towards us so fast. Well, if you read the actual paper, there's a 1 in 10,000 chance this thing is going to get within 100 AU, astronomical units, from the sun within 1.5 million years. But the article makes it sound like, oh my gosh, so you click on it and then you're like, why did I just click on this? This was stupid. So I just see all of this being pushed out there, all of this promotion of lens flares and hysteria, to where if there is this Planet X out there that causes some serious chaos, people will be so disassociated by that time that it might be too late for many people, like you're referring to. Now, still, I am very neutral on this topic, but I do see a lot of stuff being pushed by the mainstream and also the subliminal programming of the commercials and the articles that come out there that are presented to us, to see what that does to the human conscious and the subconscious mind as well. So this is certainly a possibility. And then when you brought up on a previous show about the increase in meteors, I looked into that, and there is a huge increase in meteors. There's a major increase in volcanoes and earthquakes, and a lot of this stuff is man-made also. I'm not saying it's from this giant planet, but when Caltech comes out and says it's causing the sun to tilt and it's way far away, well, if it gets a little bit closer, how is that not going to affect the Earth? In my opinion, it would affect the Earth, wouldn't it?
It would. And you know, I wrote about Mike Brown and Caltech and what they did with the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos is the Soros of the publishing industry. And, you know, it really was something that they threw out there very quickly. Because what happened was there were 2 papers that were released by astronomers in, I believe, Chile, and at a very large telescope array, the largest in the world, as I recall. And they discovered, they didn't have hypothetical evidence. They actually discovered 2 objects. They cited 2 objects. One, which they believed was a planet several times the size of Earth, And the other, which they hypothesized, is a very old and cold brown dwarf star. When I saw them announce the possibility that it could be an old cold star, I knew, oh man, you poor boys are going to just get your heads handed to you now. You know, you could have said there's 10 million planets out there and that's not going to bother anybody. But the minute you start, you know, anything that would imply we live in a binary or trinary system, all of a sudden you are going to bring the wrath of God on you from these guys. Excuse me. And because it really goes to the heart of everything that we're talking about. So what happened was Mike Brown got with some gal at the Washington Post who's, you know, she does the fluff pieces, you know, where to buy the best bagels in town. I call her cream cheese girl. And and they absolutely did a horrible smear job on these astronomers, vicious, totally vicious. But then they went and took it to the next step. And I knew that this was clearly fake news, organized disinformation, very well funded attack. You know, this girl did it. She wrote the article because she wanted to go play with the big boys. She's out of her league, and you know, they'll use her and toss her. But they were going after Percival Lowell and Robert H. Harrington, I think. What they were doing was mocking and ridiculing these guys, all right? Percival Lowell is the American father of Planet X research, all right? When he founded the Lowell Observatory in Prescott, Arizona, he did it because he wanted to find Planet X. Because for a long time after the discovery of Uranus, and it was observed it had perturbations in its orbit, and that's important because, Neptune. Uranus was the first planet discovered with a telescope. Neptune was discovered with mathematics. And it was the perturbation in the orbit of Neptune that they knew there had to be a perturber out there, and so they were looking for the perturber. And, you know, then he was doing the canals of Mars, and they just really were, you know, laughing and mocking and ridiculing him in this. But it was like he had nothing to do with what was happening in Chile. And the people in Chile had never mentioned any of these people. And yet they're being mocked and ridiculed because, you know, this was something where they had to shut down the topic. They needed to terminate this conversation, or at least control it, because it was really going to the heart of the things that I've been talking about for all these years. And so they had this Planet 9 theory, probably just, you know, it was an old paper half completed sitting on the tabletop somewhere. And they said, okay, we got to control the conversation. So we just can't kill that and then do nothing, because then it'll resurface. So we have to, you know, in Russia, the Soviets were very good. People used to call the Soviet system painted rust. They couldn't fix the bridge, so they would just paint over the rust, make it look pretty. And so what they did here is with Planet 9, it's a painted rust strategy. I mean, no sooner than they came out with it, it was so loose that astronomers in Italy were able to discount half of it. I mean, just like within days of announcement. I mean, you know, that's pretty thin stuff. But, you know, where other astronomers, if they had done that, would, you know, they probably could have seen their careers collapse. Mike Brown gets away with it because he's Pluto killer. By the way, he didn't actually do the observations that established that Pluto was not big enough, you know, to be a planet. That was done by other astronomers. He just led the charge and then dubbed himself Planet Killer or Pluto Killer. And the whole point of what they're doing is, and it's just exactly as you talked about, this is actually a case of misinformation for the purpose of misdirection. They're getting people off, you know, they're just getting people off to off track so that they cannot follow the topic. And we're going to see a lot of that. Now, most likely, when we're all seeing it in the sky, I mean, people are putting up observation reports all the time. And this is an object that currently behind the sun, so it's difficult to observe. You're going to see it around sunrise and sunset. You also have the problem with global dimming caused by chemtrail spraying, which is also vociferously denied.
Well, now they admitted it the other day, Marshall. They came out. Well, you can't call it a chemtrail because if you call it a chemtrail, you're a conspiracy theorist. But the CIA leader or the head of the CIA came out and said, "Well, it's called aerosol injections, stratosphere aerosol injections, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to get rid of global warming and it's going to save everybody, pretty much." So yeah, they've admitted it. I mean, it's just you can't call it a chemtrail because you're a conspiracy theorist. You have to call it what the new term. But yeah, I mean, it's like I just picked up a new telescope. I picked up a nice one. It's a Celestron Nexstar 8SE. It's an 8-inch telescope, and I picked up a nice camera to go with it. We're going to do a thing essentially where I've got people from around the world that are going to have an opportunity to send me coordinates, and we'll do live shows, and we're going to try and find this thing. So, more people are getting aware of this kind of stuff, and they want to get to the truth. So I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to hide this. And then I forgot to mention a few years ago, an article came out that was pushed on Yahoo News a lot. I think it might have been space.com that came out with it originally. Don't quote me on that. But it said Betelgeuse is going to be seen in the sky, and it had a picture of Luke Skywalker and the two suns in the background. They said you're going to see it in a few years, and it's going to look like a second sun possibly, or an exploding star, but it's from Betelgeuse. So that's more of that predictive programming and just get people docile to the possibilities.
That's right. So all of this is happening. And then when you see them on TV, and you're going to see the Mike Jones guys, and they're going to be going, look, it's just an interesting light show. It's a new kind of comet we've never seen before, but don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Then what they're going to immediately, they're going to go, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Then they're going to drag out alleged, supposed conspiracy theorists, all right, who are going to agree with that. Now, and I publish, so I can just say it, but it's going to be guys like Broussard who are going to go, well, yeah, it's just going to be an interesting light show. So then they're going to say fair and balanced. We have the official view. We have the so-called conspiracy theorists, and they all agree nothing's going to happen. Go back to the mall, have a good time. And when you hear that message on the corporatist propaganda channels, that's when you have your last opportunity to do something. That's it. After that, when they come back on and you hear them say something like, well, this passage of this object turned out to be a little more complicated than we thought, and we've had to upgrade our models. We've done that, and after due diligence and consideration, blah, 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 it's not going to get really much worse than right now. So, and we can manage this, have no fears, just, do what your government tells you to do, and you're going to be okay. And you know what? People are going to go, okie dokie, okie dokie, please, lie to me, lie to me. Yeah, I mean, the analogy, I think I used it with you once more. It's like a housewife who finds 5 shades of lipstick on her collar of her husband's dress shirt for work, and confronts him with it. And he says, don't worry, honey, it's just the same woman. She likes 5 different shades of lipstick, but I dumped her and there's only you in my life and I'm terribly sorry and we're going to be happy forever. And she goes, okie dokie, and, as implausible and as improbable as it sounds on something like that, that's how much people are going to want to be lied to. But then there are going to be the people who are going to look at that and they're going to go, no, I'm not buying this nonsense. No sale. No sale. I am looking at something that is a clear and present danger. And I need to get my flock, I need to get my loved ones, we need to get the hell out of here and do something about this. And that's when there's going to be faith-based leaders. See, I believe, and I've been studying this, man, since 2002, studying all of this. And I'm projecting myself into the future. Who's most likely going to be able to organize to do something about it? It's going to be churches, particularly the independent churches, not so much the mainstream churches, because they're heavily bureaucratic and those are very heavily controlled. But it's going to be the little churches that, somebody just feels the need to get out there and share the word or whatever they want to do. And they're going to be the independent kind of folks. And they're going to look at this and they're going to go, you know, we got to get out of here. If they're along a coast or something like that, they're going to want to do something about it. And the thing is that these churches and faith-based groups have three very clear, distinct advantages. One, they have a clear chain of command that's established and accepted. Now, yeah, all things are political, churches included, more so. But there is an accepted hierarchy. That's really important because you look at where you have egalitarian survival communities or secular survival communities, and they're very good at stockpiling, building, getting ready, you know, all this stuff. But then absent a clear and present danger, they collapse on themselves because people start vying for control and leadership becomes a crisis issue. So faith-based organizations have a real advantage here that they're not going to succumb to this. Then the second advantage that they have is logistics. You know, it could take a church 30 years to raise the money to build a library or a school. But if there's a natural disaster and people are in need, you know, 3 days, boom, they're good to go. They got it organized. Everybody whips into shape and they get out there and they do it. And, you know, you don't have bean counters going, well, now where's the return on the investment for the investors? You know, it's a service to others' effort, and that's it. They just go with what they have and they get out there and they start doing something to help the people. Then the third thing that these faith-based organizations have that is a real advantage is the fact that they have a diversity of skill sets. Now, earlier I said, and this is important, I want to drum it into your listeners, the having of things is not the most important aspect. It's the knowing of things. Because you can stockpile all the stuff that you want. But the fact is, we're going into a decade-long tribulation. So all you're really doing is you're not creating a survival stockpile. You're creating a bridging supply, something to help you get by until you can develop renewable solutions that you can sustain. And, you know, and people go out and I watch, you know, what they're buying and survival supplies. And so freeze-dried stuff is really popular. You know, just add water, survival supplies. Well, that's not survival supplies. That's what we call camping food. So why do we call it camping food instead of calling it survival supplies? Well, fine. You put 500 pounds worth of, you know, those 5-gallon buckets you could buy at Costco of survival food. It's all dehydrated. Well, if it's dehydrated, you have to rehydrate it, cook it before you can eat it. That means you got to have potable water. I mean, you can boil water, and there's still going to be nasties in that water that can get you. All right. So making potable water is more than just boiling it. You have to have the potable water. Now, when we're in a situation where there is no longer a power grid to power the water plants, all right, that are putting, you know, municipal water systems, making them work so that when you turn a tap, there's pressure and the water comes out. When those, they can't pump water, then you turn the tap and you may get a little bit of a dribble, but you're sure not going to get the 5, 10, 15, 20 gallons that you want to grab. So we're going to be in a situation where getting water, potable water, is for us going to be a third world reality. In the third world, and it's one of the reasons why they call it the third world, is finding the basic necessities of life. Potable water, cooking fuel, and so forth consumes a better part of the day. People got to walk for miles to go find a fresh source of water and bring it back so that they have enough fresh water for the day. So now you have to go out and forage for the water to rehydrate the food. And if you're out there and you are spending all this time away from your campsite or wherever your survival site is foraging for water, then The folks that are there are going to be more susceptible to attack because they're not going to have strong numbers. And you are going to be more susceptible to attack because you're out there fumbling around looking for fresh water. And if somebody's looking to grab something or do something, all they know is that, they just, be like the lions on the savannah, sit off, and see who comes to drink at the watering hole. And then you have to have fuel to cook your dehydrated camping food. And now you have smoke if you don't know how to make a smokeless fire. And you're going to also have light. So then the question is, do you cook at night where people are going to see your fire? And it's, they can easily get a bead on your location. And then there's the smell aspect of it. You're cooking this food and it's going to put off this wonderful odor because that's what this stuff does. It's well spiced, lots of delicious spices. So when you make a bowl of it and you pass it around, oh, this is so good, delicious, chop, chop, chop. And so you have all these delicious spices in all of this so-called dehydrated survival food. And when people are starving, their sense of smell is heightened. Now, are these people going to wander into your camp and say, I wish I was as smart as you and I had dehydrated food. We're starving to death. My wife and my children are dying before my eyes. I just wanted to come in here and congratulate you on being so smart. Now, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go back with my family and we're going to starve to death peacefully. You really think that's going to happen? No. All right. So what is real survival food? Well, what does the military have? MREs, meal ready to eat. Okay. It doesn't give off. They have a way to heat the packet. They have a way to, it's already pre-cooked. You don't call attention to yourself. You just put it in the, you just warm it up using, no light, no heat, no scent, no smell. You eat it, there you go. Now, if you can't afford MREs, then a can of chili, a can of beans. If you get cans of vegetables. What you have to think about is that you get this stuff. Yeah, it's heavier than all this freeze-dried stuff. But remember, you're not having to schlep water. So if you have a pound of freeze-dried food, how many gallons of water is it going to take for you to process that food, cook it, and prepare it? And how many pounds will that translate into? And when you go out and reverse the equation, all of a sudden, if it's in a can, you just open the can and you eat it out of the can. It hydrates your body, and you're eating food that's cooked. And if you have a situation where you can heat it, good for you. If you have you're driving down the road, you're in your car, and you got to go somewhere and you want to stop off the side of the road and have a hot meal, you can take your cans of food, pull off the paper labels, and leave the can on top of the engine. Go drive on down the road for a few miles. When you pull over to eat, just have a nice, oven mitt so you can take the can off the top of the engine. It'll all be mixed perfectly and heated. Open up the can, eat it, enjoy your meal. So there's common sense to these things. And that's the reason why I look at a lot of these consumer solutions, and it's setting people up for problems. If you're going to say, fine, I'm going to load up a corner of the garage with all of this dehydrated survival food. And, people are, by nature, they go out, and I did a video, 5 stages of catastrophism. First stage is, I don't have time for this crap. Second stage is, oh crap. Third stage is, share the crap. Fourth stage is, crap happens. And the fifth stage is, the universe is unfolding as it should. Well, when people are in stage 3, it's the most dangerous. Share the crap. Because they're telling everybody that's still back in stage 1, I don't have time for it. And so their neighbors are all going to be, that nut at the end of the street, blah, blah, blah. There was a great Twilight Zone show about that. And this doctor had built a bunker. Next thing you knew, his neighbors were absolutely freaking out. They had been laughing at him and making jokes at his expense. But when they thought that the nuclear war was going to start, they bashed down the door to his bunker. They were totally hysterical. I mean, that's the reason why I hear people who are in awareness and they lament to me and they go, you know, my husband or my wife just says, well, when it happens, I want to be at ground zero and die. That's denial bravado. Frankly, it's just happy bullshit. And excuse the language. But they're sitting there going,
tell us how you really feel, Marshall.
Okay, all right. You know, yeah, I'm masking my feelings, aren't I? But but you know, when they're actually faced with it, and it's like, okay, how do you really want to die? Do you want to drown when the tsunami hits? Or do you want to breathe in volcanic ash until it turns into a concrete slurry in the bottom of your lungs and chokes you to death? Do you want to, you know, have solar radiation from a CME burn the skin off your body? How do you want to die? Because every which way you're going to die badly. And when people see that, you really think this bravado, well, I just want to pull up a lawn chair at ground zero with a bucket of beer, and I'm just going to sit there and my chips and my beer, and I'm going to wait to go bing in an instant, and I'm with God. It ain't going to happen that way. People are going to die. They're going to die badly. And when they see that coming, all that bravado goes out the door. That's when they turn into screaming Jimmys, afraid for their life. You know, when the Consta Concordia, that ship that, remember the one in Italy that was passing too close to the shore? Mm-hmm. And it, well, when the passengers, they threw ropes out off the side of the ship so passengers could walk down the ropes. They were rope ladders, okay? And that they could get into the rescue vessels. And there were men who were so desperate to save themselves, they were pushing women and children out of the way so that they could clamber down the rope ladders. I mean, compare that with the Titanic going down, where the men just made sure the women and the children were on the boats and they died stoically. And the guy that owned the ship, he snuck into a boat with a bunch of women because he was a coward. All right. And, you know, this is going to be the reality of it. This is what people are going to be facing when this comes. And they're going to be set up for it. Yeah, there's going to come a point of time where there's a large rage and they're going to be angry and shaking their fists and, you know, why weren't we told? What are you going to say to them? Yeah, like you were deaf, dumb, and blind? You were willfully naive and ignorant? And you wanted to keep it that way, and any opportunity that you had to be informed, you scoffed and scorned, ridiculed, and mocked people. You know, I'll tell you, yeah, earlier on when I did Yowza, I would have whistleblowers coming to me. And I got to the point where I just was telling the whistleblowers, look, don't do it. Don't do this. Because I understand your motive. You want to be able to look at yourself in the morning when you shave. You're feeling the humanity of it. But the truth simply is, all you're going to achieve by coming forward with your knowledge is the destruction of your own life. Because whistleblowers are despised. They're despised by the people they blow the whistle on, and there's very little regard for them, you know, elsewhere, the people that are the beneficiaries of it. Yeah, I mean, look what you have guys like Julius Assange. This poor guy is locked up in this embassy in England. He can't even get dental work. Snowden, he did us a great service. As a matter of fact, President Obama will leave office with a very distinguished record when it comes to whistleblowers. He will have prosecuted more whistleblowers in his presidency than all of the other presidencies put together. Okay? Now, this is the guy that came in blowing smoke about we're going to be open. We're going to be transparent. No. So I would tell him, don't do it. People are going to mock and ridicule you. They're going to laugh at you, or they're not going to care. I mean, you know, if we would really if we really did value justice, all right, if we really did value the truth, then why haven't there been any marches in front of the White House saying, pardon Snowden? Why? Why haven't there been marches for Julius Assange? Why? Why do they have to, be forced out to the fringe into these lurky existences? And so, I look at the people, and the people are not doing anything. They're not valuing this. So these are all the things that have been set up and put into motion. And, for one simple reason, what the elites want is the maximum possible dieback. This is an extinction level event, and it's being engineered. And people are participating with it. And they're at a very distinct disadvantage, between fluoride in the water, chemtrailing, GMO, processed foods, high fructose corn sewage, all the rest of this. All right. People are numbed and dumbed. They don't have the ability to fight back, but there are those that really can and really will. So, when I wrote Survival Wellness Advocacy and the Big Win, and again, you can get a free ebook edition. You need to go to my church site, knowledgemountain.org. And if you go to my regular website, yowusa.com or marshallmasters.com, the links will be there, and you can buy a print copy or get the free PDF. But when I wrote this as an author, you have to imagine in your mind your audience. Who am I talking to? It's like public speaking in a sense. If you take a course in public speaking, they're going to say, find that one friendly face in the audience and then talk to that friendly face. And that's how you get over your stage fright when you're standing in front of a large group of people. And for an author, what you're doing is you're finding that friendly face, that person that you're really in your mind writing the book to. Your book can be designed to serve a much broader audience, but like a public speaker, you're looking at that friendly face. Now, for me, the friendly face is what I call junior grandparents. These are grandparents that have grandchildren that are they're still minors, all right? And they have children who are living in ground zero locations, and they're totally in denial. And, they're going, Mom, Dad, love you, but this is really stupid, and you ought to stop thinking about this because it's really, really stupid, And they know that their progeny, their loved ones, are in a very dire situation. That when things start to happen, their ability to move out of harm's way is going to be impinged. Right now we don't think anything about it. I want to go to Florida, get down to I-10 and hook them. Okay, just keep hitting one Stuckey's after another, heading towards the east. But when things start to pop and there's martial law, and all of a sudden there's going to be a restriction of movement that's going to be more akin to what the Russian people experienced during the Soviet era, where you had to have the necessary paperwork to get from one place to another, that you couldn't live in a city without having a prospika. All right. There were a lot of men in Moscow who had no problem marrying incredibly gorgeous women, because for these women coming out of the rural areas where life was tough, their only hope of, getting there was to marry a man who had a permit to live in Moscow or St. Petersburg. And so these fellows had a real advantage. And that's the kind of environment we're going to have. So mobility is going to be dramatically curtailed. And these grandparents with these children and grandchildren in these bad areas, they see this. They're projecting into the future. You have to understand, awareness turns you into a soothsayer. You're a person who can perceive the future. Now, the future is always fluid. Things can change, but you can project forward into the future. And you can see what most likely is going to happen as things unfold. And so for these folks, it's pure torture and hell. And what they wind up with is what I call a death wish scenario. Are they going to Finally just say, I can't, get my children to look at the empirical scientific evidence that I'm seeing. They won't take a look at that. Their denial is so rabid. So I love them, and I guess all I can really do is move into this death zone area so that I can be with them when they die, that I can help them die as well as possible. And that's really what these grandparents have. And I can tell you, I have heard them crying on the phone over the years more times than I would care to imagine. And it breaks my heart each and every time. So when I wrote Survival Wellness Advocacy and the Big Win, my whole strategy, and this book is a supplemental guide to my larger book, which is Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a faith-based leadership guide. These books are written for the benefit of the leaders of these communities of about 100 or more people, because they're going to be in a massive state of awareness compression. People who've been in awareness about what's coming have usually been in awareness, believe it or not, since they were children. They've had lifetimes to process this and to come to grips with it. Now imagine people who are going to have to come to grips with it as they literally, it is right in front of them and they are entering into it. They don't have decades, they have days. And it's going to be hellacious for these people. That's the reason why, for those who are in awareness, they're in awareness not because it's their mission to buy bullets, beans, and bunkers. There are going to be a lot of scared people with big checkbooks, and they'll take care of that. Thank you. But again, remember, it's not the having of things, it's the knowing of things. And if you've been in awareness for a good portion of your life, even just for several years, if you've made it through my 5 stages of catastrophism to level 4, all right. And most of the people who joined my church, knowledgemountain.org, and I did this for people in awareness, all right. It's keep your core faith. Ain't broke, don't fix it. This is for people who are going to make a difference because they're in awareness. Your mission is not to buy bullets, beans, and bunkers. Your mission is to be a teacher, a mentor, and a comforter. And so how do you intersect with these communities that are forming? Well, you're not coming in at the ground floor level, standing in line behind a lot of other people who go, I know how to eat beans. Make me a plate of beans, and by God, I'm going to show you something that'll just knock your socks off. No, you're not going to come in at that level. I'm writing these books to help these people come in at the leadership level, like medicine men, medicine women of Native American tradition. Because for these leaders, they're going to be getting hit with a hurricane event. And it's going to have a swirl of emotions going around them. Things flying, total cacophony. You're going to have people that have been smug and proper and they knew their place in life and there was a natural order of things and so forth and so on. And everything they know now is pointless. And what are they doing? Mad scramble to regain their standing, to regain their sense of standing and position. And so they're going to be blowing nonsense out their backsides. And a leader's going to see this. But if you've been in awareness, you are that tribulation soothsayer. You are in awareness. What that leader's going to see in you, before you open your mouth, before you say a word, they're going to see you're calm and that you are centered. Because knowing of things does that for you. You know what is coming. Doesn't mean you're going, oh, goody. It's all great. Just like I told you. See, I told you. That's ego talking. And by the way, for anybody out there that thinks when it all starts to break loose, that you're going to go and say, I told you so, you're signing your own death warrant. Because hysterical people are going to go and they are going to blow up at you because now they have a target to blow up at. And you're going to have some woman or some man with a PhD probably step out from the crowd, point a finger at you and go, "You're manifesting all this. This is happening because you wanted it to happen. And if we hang you with a rope, you're dead. This manifestation goes away and our lives are normal again." That sounds absolutely, totally crazy. But that's how people are going to be responding. So don't ever, if you know what's coming when it does happen, keep your mouth shut. And if you're not prepared, doubly so, keep your mouth shut. Yeah, that's the one thing I see. A lot of people, they know what's coming, but they're watching the train wreck from the hill. So they go, "I'm not involved. I'm just a tourist." They don't know that they're in the caboose of the train and they're eventually going to be mangled in the steel as well. They don't psychologically grasp that. But for these grandparents and for everybody else that's in, because believe it or not, most of the people, 70% of the people who are in awareness in this topic, Rex, are between the ages of 45 and 75. That's where the biggest percentage are. And most of those first came into awareness when they were in during their childhood years. So it's coming in. And this is where you have this huge advantage walking in. You have the knowing of things that has centered you. And what that leader of that community is going to see in you is the eye of the storm. Every hurricane has an eye. Find the eye, and everything is calm, serene, beautiful, peaceful. You can see the wall of the hurricane around you. You can see the chaos and the horror going around you. But in the eye, it's calm enough that you can sit there and think about what you're going to do next. And that's important because survival is about learning what hurts and what works, with the goal being that you learn enough about what works before what hurts kills you. And so if you're in awareness, and have been since you were a child, this centeredness, this eye of the storm calmness that you present is going to make you valuable. And they'll see it in your countenance, they'll see it in your eyes, they'll hear it in your voice immediately. And then that's when you can sit down and say, "Okay, here we go." Now, on the back of my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, all right, what I do is I give the plan. It's very simple. You find this leader, and it has to be an independent leader. It has to be someone that is not going to follow the dictates of some home office in another country or time zones away. It's going to be someone who started that church usually, and financed it with back pocket funding. And that person is going to be independent-minded, resilient. And now you're saying, "Here we go. Here's a book. This book, you read it, it's going to give you a plan of action. Something that you can do, a reference point of the important things you need to know as the leader of a survival community." I wrote that book that way because I see phenomenal amounts of how-to knowledge out there for survivors. But it's all about being in service with a me and mine approach. I just want me and my family to survive. Everybody else, tough darts, farmer. You do whatever you're going to do. But what these people don't understand with me and mine prepping, and I'm also including the folks that are real clever and they're building $500,000, $1 million underground luxury survival condominiums with hot tubs, big screen TVs, and 2-year supplies of organic MREs, is they're going to be bunker buddies. We're talking about a tribulation that's going to last a decade. And in the initial part of it, we're going to have people that turn into predators. Worst kind. Gangs, warlords, cannibals, you name it. So there you are in your luxury condominium. You've been living okay, but now you're out of supplies. And it says, "Well, okay, let's pop the hatch, go out, start foraging, see what we can find." Well, you come out of your bunker And about a mile away, some filthy piece of thing that used to be a human being smells your healthy body in the breeze. That's the day you die badly. Very, very, very badly.
Reminds me of the movie The Road.
Yes. And so the way to survive will be in communities of 100 or more, because there is simple strength in numbers. And if you are with 100 people, you're a hard target, especially if you are really committed to being well organized, well defended. And that means in a community, everybody pulls together. Everyone works, everyone participates, everyone defends. And the communities that are, they're going to do better in these circumstances are going to be the ones where you don't have subjugation of women and children. And this is going to be the ones that take an enlightened and noble approach, which doesn't mean you just sit there and sacrifice yourself to people who want to take what you have. No. These people, these communities are going to be joined by what I call guardian warriors. These will be ex-military, paramilitary, hunters, people who understand how to reach out and touch somebody a mile away and take them down. And they're going to go out. They're going to be looking for the bad guys. And they're going to take them down long before they get anywhere near the community. Their goal is to keep them from trying to attempt the penetration of the perimeters. And inside the community, everybody's going to learn how to fight. They're going to learn how to survive. I hear women all the time going, well, yeah, I'm not going to, I don't like guns, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do guns. And, I always ask them one question. And it kind of breaks the bubble for them. I just say, okay, how many times do you have to be raped before you're going to pick up a gun? Give me a number. 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times? That is assuming the rapist doesn't slit your throat afterwards. How many times do you have to be raped before you pick up a gun? And after that, what I get is glaring silence. And because I've challenged this modern day sensibility, notions that people have evolved in a time when we turn a tap and we have fresh water to drink. We turn a dial and our homes are heated and cooled to our pleasure. We throw a switch and we have light. We turn a key and we go where we want. It's sensibilities born of this time. During the tribulation, that's gone. That's gone. And so that's a big problem people are going to have, adjusting to this new reality. And so in survival wellness advocacy and the big win, I'm talking about, the most important thing you do as a survival wellness advocate. And this is really a survival role. This is how you justify your existence, because it's one thing to come in, all right, and to be a soothsayer or a medicine man, medicine woman kind of a thing, where you're working with the leadership of the community and helping them to understand not only what they're facing, but what's going to come long-term down the road. A lot of people aren't going to see those things. And you're helping them with that. But you also have to connect with everybody in the community. Otherwise, you're going to have, a position that is not relevant to the average person, and that's wrong. The strength of it is that you are relevant to the average person. So this is where I have created what you might call a tribulation vocation of survival wellness advocacy. Now, wellness is the key term. One of the things I make a point of saying in the book is doctors cure, advocates help. And you play an important role. You're dealing with basic things, hygiene, basic wellness comfort levels. Your big thing is bolstering the immune system. You're working with simple tools, bar soap, baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, essential oils, energy healing arts, these kind of things that you're keeping survivors well. That's the important thing. Because when somebody gets sick, they all of a sudden are going to drain resources, and they're going to drain an immense amount of resources. Presently in our country right now, the majority of money in healthcare is spent on the last 2 weeks of life, which is bizarre because these are people that are days away from dying, and millions of dollars are spent to buy them 1 or 2 extra days. And those millions of dollars could go to, helping children lead more productive, healthier lives, helping the rest of the process along. So you're in a community where people are going to be, facing death. This crazy imbalance that really favors big pharma today, that goes away. Community's going to have limited resources. So once getting on a hospice care list is going to be a lot faster in those situations. And so as an advocate, you're doing palliative care, which is caring for people who have, really bad illnesses or injuries, but they can recover from, whereas hospice care, essentially the same thing, except you're helping them to ease out of life and to have a meaningful death and as painless as possible, if possible. And so you're tending to family needs that way, but you're also the one who's going to make sure everybody's washing their hands before they go in, take something out of the community soup pot. All you have to have, for women, it's not so much a thing, but for guys, you got the secret poopers. You go into, a public restroom and some guy's left a bowl full of his Wawa, kind of like out of this ego trip that I'm going to make somebody else look at it. Ha ha, I'm clever. You get this just ugliness. And
you made that so visual, I could almost smell it. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes. Oh, we're doing scratch and sniff radio. Anyway.
That's terrible. You're extremely good at making people visualize stuff.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. But now what happens is, imagine in your community you have one of these secret poopers. All it takes is a fleck of fecal matter. All right. That gets into a community soup pot, and half your community is dying of a communicable disease. Okay? You may have spent vast sums of money to build an elaborate bunker with all kinds of shielding and all kinds of provisions and all kinds of weapons, and you did all of that, and some secret pooper kills half the community because he just wants to share the misery. Doesn't care. So these are the kind of things that, as a wellness advocate, you're looking for this. You're the one that they're talking to, and you also have to be autonomous within a community. People have to understand that when they talk with you and they share their thoughts and feelings, that they have the same confidentiality they would expect with a doctor, a lawyer, a priest. Okay. And on the other hand, you are going to be talking to the leadership because you're out there. You're the one who's got your direct hand on the pulse of the community, what people are thinking and feeling. And you're able to report that to the leadership, without exposing anybody. And also another important part about being the survival wellness advocate is that you have to be the person who stands up for the most vulnerable in the community. This is absolutely important because right now in America, in the book, the third part of the book, I have a section on a scenario dealing with a woman who was raped when she was 13 years old and all of the consequences coming out of that with PTSD. And how that affects the community. And the simple truth is, you're going to have families walking in, and 1/4, you can expect anywhere from 1/5 to 1/4 of those families are going to have some sort of sexual abuse history. And you're going to have abusers and victims. And this is going to be something that, under the pressure that we're going to have of the tribulation, this is going to be a real elephant in the room kind of a problem. And so I take that on in the book and I offer a solution. But I also want to illustrate these are the kind of risks that communities are going to face. It's not what you see coming necessarily that's going to kill you, but what you don't see coming generally will. And these are the kind of threats people are they're going to be coming into these communities with all kinds of emotional baggage. That is the byproduct of our community, our society, which we have a society filled with children who are called snowflake generation. They're like snowflakes. They have to have a very narrow range in which they can exist, and otherwise they melt and deform. And so they're not resilient. And this is a real problem. If this were December 7th, 1941, and America was facing the prospect of a world war in 2 theaters, and all we had were snowflake generation, we'd all be going, Heil Hitler. We'd have lost. That generation, that greatest generation that went to war, they came out of depression. They were tough sons of guns. And they were incredibly resilient. And so we have a populace that is loaded with sexual abuse victims, snowflake generation. There's a lot of weaknesses we have to deal with here going into the bunkers. And so for that reason, we're going to have to cope with that. And the advocates are going to have to help these people to adjust to this new reality without being subjugated. And subjugation is a very, very bad form of evil, because before a man can subjugate a woman or a child, he must first subjugate himself to a greater evil. And that is a real concern. And so a woman or a child, a woman who's being beaten, a child who's being abused, they're going to be forced into silence by their abusers. As an advocate, you have to stand for them. And those things have to be dealt with. And it doesn't matter what position in the community an abuser holds. There are things that are just going to be intolerable, because if we're going to survive, we're going to survive because we have continuity of progeny. This is absolutely essential. If you have a community that at the end of the tribulation is principally comprised of 10-year-olds and 50-year-olds, it will fail. But what you need is a community that has continuity of progeny. This is something that predates World War II. Up until World War II, there was always a continuous stream of people in each of the age ranges, so that there was a continuous cycle of life, if you will, continuity of progeny. This is absolutely important. And so for this reason, the most vulnerable in the community, the women and the children, the infirm, the aged, they must be protected. They must be cherished. And because otherwise you have this Mad Max brutality, and that's just going to wind up with fragmented societies that are fear-based, feed on themselves, and once they run out of innocent people to consume and exploit, then they will turn on themselves and they will vanish. They won't have the staying power. What will have the staying power are faith-based communities that understand that what's most precious is not the bullets in the armory. What's most precious is not the gold and silver in the treasury. What's most precious is the children. Without the children, there's no continuity of progeny.
And let me jump in and ask a question about the survival community. When you said it's good to have a survival community of about 100 people, what would the key formula be of those 100 people? Now, would it be specialists in groups of like 6 or 8, such as doctors, medical professionals, security specialists, electronic engineers, botanists, chemists, construction workers, hunters, trappers, scientists, military, law enforcement, or something else?
Well, let me answer that in the Buddhist tradition. I'll have one of everything. Here's the point, Rex, and this is the third virtue and diversity of skills that a faith-based community has. Now think about it. You go to church on Sunday, you sit there, and you're praying in the pews and you're singing. Person to your left could be a doctor. The person to your right could be a sanitation worker. The one ahead of you could be an oral hygienist. The one behind you could be a plumber. See, that's the beauty of faith-based organizations. They draw people for a common purpose of celebrating their relationship with Creator, but they draw them from every walk of life. And so you are going to have a diverse range of skills immediately. It's not like, people think, for-profit corporations are going to have this. No. They're looking for very specific skill sets because return on investment is the choice of, it's the criteria. That's what they're looking for. But in a church, you don't have return on investment. You just have, you want to celebrate God with us? Come on. All right, let's get together and let's do it together. Now, you have all these people have all these diverse ranges, and they're going to have hobbies and pursuits. You're going to have a grandmother there who's a crackerjack organizer, does book sales to raise money for the church, who happens to love to grow herbs in her garden. She's bringing in terrific skills. She's a human gem. She's an organizer. She's someone that makes things happen. She's doing book sales, so she's knowing where to find bargains on books because knowledge is important, accumulating this knowledge for the community. You could have a guy who, maybe he's a lawyer, but he's also, he likes doing competition marksmanship. And so he teaches, say, for example, he's a range instructor for Project Appleseed. It's a wonderful organization to help people learn how to be very good shooters. All right. And so all of a sudden he brings in that skill. You have maybe that, a dental hygienist. All right. And yeah, she's really good at cleaning teeth, but when she's not doing that, she's got a ham shack in her house and she's into trying to talk into people on HF across the Atlantic and the Pacific. She brings in that kind of skill. So in other words, that's the beauty of faith-based organizations. You have a diversity of skills within, and then you have, through associations based in other motives than return on investment, these people are going to know other people with other useful skills, and they can then recruit them and draw them into these communities as well. There's a tremendous amount of human wealth. A tremendous amount of human wealth. There is a lot of people there that are going to have the knowing of things. That's really, really important.
It's certainly amazing the possibilities with people being able to connect with other people that have like minds and ideals now with the internet age, and hopefully people will be in a place of protection when and if things do get to a situation where it's catastrophic, like Walking Dead type stuff. And it's interesting because I used to actually, when I worked for a Fortune 100 company downtown San Antonio, for a while there, I was taking a bug out bag with me to work, even though it was less than 20 miles from my house. And I started to think of, and I got grief from a lot of people I work with. And the funny thing is now one person in particular that used to give me a hard time about it takes a bug out bag with him to work every day. And he lives 15 miles from his work, so it's kind of funny. He does what I used to do. But I think about it now, and instead of having to carry an entire bag, I mean, if you're 15, 20 miles away from your house and something does happen to where you have to walk home, do you really need a 30-pound backpack with all your gear for camping? Or would you be just as comfortable with a flashlight that's very bright and, like maybe a tactical type self-defense tool? You don't necessarily need a gun if you're in a state you can't have a gun. They've got these really cool tactical pens now. There's this one called 1TAC. I've got one. I think this thing is awesome. It's the coolest tactical pen you could ask for. It's got a flashlight built into it. You can take the back off, and it's got a blade. And I mean, the thing is just great. It's made out of aluminum that's like aircraft aluminum. And then there's also like a flashlight too that's connected to it. But then it's also another good thing I think that people can have if they're concerned about this kind of stuff and they work somewhere downtown, they're a ways away from their house, but they don't want to necessarily take a bug out bag with them. Pick up a really good flashlight and a tactical tool that's like a multi-purpose tool like I just talked to you about. There's this one flashlight in particular that's made by One Tac also that's got 1,200 luminens, or how do you pronounce that? Lumens? And lumens. Lumens. It's double the power of the most powerful mag light that's available, almost double the power. Like this mag light 643, the thing weighs almost 2 pounds. It's a foot long. You've seen those things, they're huge. But this one that I'm talking about, it's only about 5 inches. You can put it in your pocket. So just a couple of things like that. If you guys are interested in the One Tac, check out 1TAC. I'll leave a link after the podcast. Make sure to use the code LEAK-PROJECT. You can get a discount up to 75%. But I really like how you bring this to the attention of people that are listening to this podcast, Marshall, about, okay, if things happen, which there's a good chance that at some point they could, be in an area that it's not going to be instant destruction. And, you do bring up some very powerful points because you watch the films out there where people know that something's going to happen, but they just want to stay there. They just think that they're going to die within half a second. And like you said, they can drink champagne or beer until it happens, have a nice sandwich to go with it. I don't know, have some caviar while you go.
You got it right. You got it.
But people need to be aware of that kind of stuff. And if I get advance notice about something going down, I certainly want to be in a position where I can help people afterwards. I don't want to be in a position of death. And I think that we can all contribute. So why don't we think about these kind of things? That's really important. And that's what I like about your website, YOWUSA.com, is you have a lot of different blogs and information there for people that do want to go to the next level. Because wouldn't it be great? Let's say things do cause serious doom and millions of people pass. Well, those that survive, those people will have an opportunity to create something fresh and brilliant. And instead of having this cyclical, this cycle of doom and gloom, something bright that their future generations can look forward to. Look at the light at the end of the tunnel here.
Yeah, and I am trying to prepare people for what I call the big win. Because that's the title of the book. So survival, wellness, advocacy, and the big win. And I get like, Marshall, what's the big win? We're having a tribulation. Not fun. There is a big win. And that is, if we have a big win, what we have is an enlightened age, a Star Trek future. That's our big win. That's what I'm trying to convey to people because, for a long time, I've really known and understand what the plan of the elites are. We are a slave species. It's hard to think that you're a slave when you're busy chirping away in a gilded cage. But we are a slave species. Otherwise, why would you have a handful of people who have more combined wealth than the bottom 2.5 billion souls on the planet? 7 people having more value, more wealth than the bottom 2.5 billion put together cumulatively. That's staggering. And that is a slave society. And what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to reestablish their dominion. See, during the tribulation, Planet X, you can see Planet X and it's coming through and it's going to bring a disaster. It certainly is. But it is also going to unshackle us as a species. And when we are dying in vast numbers, the truth is we will be dying as free men and women, truly free. So it behooves the survivors to keep the elites from reasserting the shackles of slavery, putting them back on again. So how do they do that? I talk about this in my books, is that the last major event of the tribulation will be transiting the tail. And towards the end of this is when they're going to pop up from their underground bunkers, open up the Svalbard seed vault and all these things. And they're going to say to the survivors, looky what we brung you. We have food, we have seeds, we have clothing, we have medicine, construction materials, everything you need to rebuild life as you once knew it. All you have to do is accept our dominion and take the chip. And there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be in desperate conditions, and they're going to reason to themselves and say, well, it's a bad deal. We'll take it for now because it's expedient, but then we'll figure a way to squeeze out of it. No, there won't be any way to squeeze out of it. Once you sign on the dotted line, that's it. You have signed on the dotted line. And it's no different than, America, indentured servitude was a big thing in America. There were a lot of people who signed away their life for a period of time, came to the colonies and worked like slaves. And then once they paid off their indentured amount, they were given their freedom. But if they decided to bug out before they were given their freedom, well, that was it. Their lives were toast. It was very strictly enforced. And so that's what they're going to do. And then the thing that's really sad about these RFID tags they're going to put in, because they're based on ET technology, alien technology. And, you drive down the road and you see these guys that are ham radio operators, and they got these big whip antennas on their trucks and cars. You've seen the big whip antennas. And these radios broadcast at a power of 50 watts. That's what mobile radios are doing, 50 watts. Well, the human body generates enough power to light a 100-watt bulb. We learned this when we watched The Matrix, right? Well, if you take...
It's powering a lot more than a light bulb in The Matrix.
That's right. And you take and put an RFID tag into the body what you have is the body becomes a human antenna, and it becomes the power source. So the RFID tag is a transceiver. It's sending and receiving, and it's a multi-band, multi-mode transceiver. So it's sending and receiving on multiple frequencies in multiple modes simultaneously. And consequently, theirs is going to be the one where, yes, it's the transponder mode, so they can find you if you wander off, and they can, come out and rescue you, or information about your health. If you're having a heart attack, they'll know you're having a heart attack, where to find you, come rescue you. All these things they're going to talk about, how wonderful that is. What they're not going to talk about is the ELF programming that's going to happen, where these devices are going to be emitting extremely low frequency signals, and the brain is going to pick them up and reprogram the brain. So, first thing they're going to do after tribulation settles down is they'll launch rockets and replace satellites that have been taken out of orbit. And they're going to be broadcasting signals that are picked up by the RFID tags, and they're going to start reprogramming people. These tags they're not going to be unpleasant. They're going to be like electronic Prozac. Once you're tagged, you're going to have a very calm, think about people who are taking Xanax, Prozacs, these kind of things. They just don't get emotional enough about anything to react. They just kind of like la. They're, in a very pleasant stupor.
Constant hypnosis.
Huh?
They're under constant hypnosis.
Yeah, really. And so that's what these RFID tags are going to do. But then they're going to take it one step further, and this is the part that I find to be most disheartening and most serious. And they have determined the frequency by which we feel the presence of God and our connection, to across the veil. And what they can do is put up a blocking field, jam the frequency, so that you're not going to feel that connection to God anymore. Then what they do is they use a different frequency to replace God with what they want you to think God is. And then at that point, their control over you is complete, total, and final. And if they're successful in doing this, then we will be a slave species for countless generations to come, and will continue to be so until such a time as there's nothing left to steal from our planet, that there are no real natural resources left that are important. And that's going to be because we'll probably have, turned our planet into a barren wasteland. And we're already in the Holocene extinction, which is a man-made induced extinction. We're losing species every day. And we keep doing this, then, at some point the planet becomes lifeless, very much lifeless. And when that happens, there's really nothing left that other races are going to be interested in, because it's the genetic material that's really worth it. So that brings us to the point of the big win. Okay. And the big win, when people join Knowledge Mountain Church, one of the things that they have to do when they come in, they can get, come in for meetings and get help and talk with folks. But to really get engaged at a broader level, they have to have an MVP, a mission victory plan. And this is where you're seeing that you have, if you're going to endure the hardships of the tribulation, you have to have a vision of what success looks like. At the end of 10 years, it's just not that you're wishing you were dead every day. That's not going to pull you through. You got to have a vision of success. And because that's what's going to pull you forward. Because there's going to be plenty of nights you're going to lay your head down and you're going to say, God, take me in my sleep. I can't live this life anymore. And if you've really been good, maybe God's going to listen, and there you go. You get to fly over, and it's painless, and you die in your sleep. But in most cases, you'll just wake up in the morning and you got to take it on. And you got to go out there and make it happen. If you have a vision of success, then that's going to have something that's a destination for you to go to. And that's going to make your life more constructive and possible. Now, my MVP, my vision plan, okay, is No. That's it. People saying no. No to the elites when they come up with their inducements to take back upon ourselves the shackles of slavery, the chips and all of the trinkets and toys they're offering. And there's enough people that just say, no, we don't want it. They pull a Gandhi. We're not going to participate. Now, these people, when they say no, understand they're not saying no to the carrot. They're saying no to the stick, because that's the way the elites go. If you don't take the deal, we're going to make you regret that you didn't take the deal. But these people are going to understand that there is something more valuable than life itself. Freedom. Freedom is more valuable than life itself. And they'll bear that final burden. And it won't be a majority of humanity that does it. You know, during the American Revolution, it only took 30% of the colonists to win the revolution. 70% of the colonists either sat in the peanut gallery watching what was going on, staying out of the fight, or worse yet, they sided with the Brits against those who were trying to win their freedom. It only took 30%. In other words, you don't need a majority. All you need is a critical mass. Enough people to make it happen. Or in other words, all you need is 100 monkeys. Okay? And, you know, you can look this up on Wikipedia, 100th monkey. It was after they were doing all the atomic testing in the Pacific. They found these monkeys that were washing their potatoes in the river. And a few of them began doing this, and they were teaching them to do it, because that way they could get the radioactive particles off of it, and they weren't being so heavily affected. And then the 100th monkey syndrome came about, as they reported, was that monkeys on adjacent islands who no way could have observed or been there to see these other monkeys washing their potatoes began mimicking the same behavior, and they began washing their potatoes. So we communicate in different ways. There is that bond that brings us together, that awareness, that connection. RFID tags are going to be designed to break that, so that a 100th monkey scenario will not happen. So for the people who break that bond, okay, all right, they're refusing to be chipped, then there's just going to be a necessity for enough of them to say no. And at that point, this whole scheme that the elites have prepared, it's a bluff. It's like trying to win it's like trying to win a poker game, and all you're holding in your hand is a pair of deuces. Okay? They're bluffing. It's all a bluff. And if enough people call the bluff, we have a 100th monkey situation, their whole scam collapses. And what happens after that is the big win. Humanity, free of the shackles of slavery, will have its age of enlightenment, and we will have a Star Trek future. We will go to the heavens and be welcomed as friends, not feared as Anunnaki stormtroopers. So, that's my mission victory plan. And, that's the reason why everybody comes in now. We want them to do an MVP. And this is how we pull through. You got to have a reason to get up in the morning. And if you have a reason to get up in the morning, you usually do.
Yeah, now that's important. You've got to have some type of passion and something that keeps you going, because if you do and you keep your eye on the prize, it makes everything just so much easier. It flows smoother, and better things happen to people that follow the path, I think, that they feel is important. Usually, if it's in your gut, if you sense it, go with it, and great things happen. But there's so many people that are stuck in the daily grind, which is so difficult to get out of. I mean, trust me, I know it took me 20 years to break out of that corporate system, essentially, and do things for myself. And a lot of people that have came on the Leap Project actually have branched off now and are doing their own things, and they're very successful at it. So I think that that's fantastic. And Marshall, I really appreciate everything that you do. I wish you the very best. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, check out yowusa.com if you haven't already. There's updates there constantly. And anything else you'd like to share with us before we close out tonight, Marshall?
Yeah, just remember, it's not about holding on to things. It's about holding on to each other.
Right on. All right. And also, ladies and gentlemen, check out leakproject.com and youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Be the change you want to see, question everything, and remember, ignorance is not bliss. Good night. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leap Project. We have Marshall Masters with us from yowusa.com, and we are going to be discussing the most recent data that is available through different scientific communities on the rise of meteors that have been reported, volcanic activity, earthquakes, pandemics, and an enormous spike in the global population. What could we expect over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and beyond? What will your grandchildren and great-grandchildren be inheriting? This will be discussed, and things that we can do to make a difference with Mr. Masters today at Leak Project. And if you've been following us here at Leak Project, you might have noticed an increase in videos on our channel, from satire to serious issues. I've always enjoyed a good cup of coffee in the morning, and over the past few months, the morning coffee has really lost some of its luster, so I started drinking the super tea, and this stuff is just awesome. I've had more energy, the creative juices have been flowing through my mind, and I quit drinking so much coffee. So if you guys are kind of interested in an alternative, maybe you want to cut down on the coffee for health benefits and stuff, I'll check this stuff out. It's getthetea.com. Marshall, it's great to have you with us on the show here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Hey, Rex, I'm good. Always good to be back. I enjoy doing shows with you, and because you just have such a good high standard of integrity, and I really do appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you too, and that means a lot to me. Thank you. If I wasn't doing this here, I'd be doing it somewhere else, like literally at lunchrooms, during break rooms at work, I'd be talking to people about this kind of stuff. So I'd be doing it here or somewhere else. So I just appreciate having all you guys, and I know that we did our first interview a few years ago. And since then, it's opened up a lot of new opportunities for me as well. I've met a lot of people that are friends with you that you've made good connections with, so I appreciate you as well. And you've recently put together a book that is also available for free too. I mean, on ebook status. It's called Survival Wellness Advocacy: The Big Win. I always like to have a paper book though, just because I like it in the hands. I like the the feeling of the paper, the smell of the fresh paper, and plus, if something does happen where you don't have access to it online, it's right there in front of you. But if you would kind of talk to us a little bit about the work that you recently put together and why you feel it's so important right now in today's day and age.
Well, thank you. The book, Survival Wellness Advocacy and the Big Win, is available both in print and in ebook. And the print edition, you can find it on Amazon. I sell a signed edition directly. And just go to yowusa.com and you'll see the link. But also, this one I decided to release in ebook. It's a PDF ebook, and designed specifically for that reader environment, and which can also be imported into Kindle readers. And that is absolutely free, and I encourage people to share it with their loved ones and friends. I've really, this year, decided that it's time for me to start pushing into a new direction. I've always, over the years, been ahead of my audience, typically by a year or 2 years. And that's just by virtue of the fact that this is what I do 7 days a week, and have been doing it that way since 2002. And right now, there's a tremendous amount of validation reporting. I'm happy to see that. Validation reporting is, people getting on YouTube talking about earthquakes, volcanoes, meteors, all of these things, which really are very useful, very helpful for those who are just now coming into awareness. What I'm really doing is focusing on the folks who are They've been in awareness for some time, and now they can see that this is what I call the gathering. This is when people need to start gathering together and saying, okay, it's one thing to sit there and study it to death. It's another thing to do something about it. Because if you're not, if you're not new to the topic, then you run a risk of what I, call becoming a tribulation couch potato. All right. And, you can just start following this stuff. And it's like, a Cheech and Chong movie, ooh, wow, man, check out the earthquakes. And
Right.
it's hard to understand that you're really seeing what's affecting you. A lot of times people just view everything that's going on right now, and it's all going ballistic. And they are watching a slow motion train wreck, very long train, and they're mesmerized. And they feel like they're maybe standing on an overpass or on a hill overlooking the tracks. And so they're detached. They're spectators. They're just watching it happen. And they're not understanding that they're in the caboose of that train. And they eventually are going to be wrapped up in mangled steel along with everybody else. And so that is the concern that I have. I see people doing that, and they will keep doing this and doing this and doing this and doing this. I call it catastrophe toking, and it paralyzes them. They're not really sitting there saying, well, what can I do? And this is partly because we are indoctrinated from birth as consumer robots. We define our lives by the things we do not have. We do not have the newest car. We do not have the biggest house. We do not have the most prestigious job. We do not have this. We do not have that. And so what is it? We go do something productive for somebody else, or go into credit card debt, whatever we're going to do to take care of those deficiencies, because that's how we measure our lives, in terms of deficiencies. What I'm saying to people is that if you can't afford bullets, beans, and bunkers, stop playing the game. It's not about being capable of buying a mountain of beans. It's about being worth your weight in beans. And that is the whole emphasis of everything that I'm trying to do right now in helping people, is to convey to them a simple message. It's not the having of things that is most important. It is the knowing of things that is. All right. And so this is where particularly I see with grandparents who have grandchildren and children living in ground zero areas like Los Angeles. All right. And they're dead. When this thing breaks loose, that's it. And they're in total agony because they're trying to tell their loved ones, just look at the published empirical data. Okay. It's there. YouTube is now the best resource for it. And there's a lot of wonderful blog sites. Mainstream media is corporatist, controlled by the elites. And that whole strategy is, keep them stupid so that they don't do anything. More importantly, keep them confused, because when people are confused, they can't get a good beat on things. And if they can't get a good beat on things, then that justifies doing nothing. All right. And they'll, well, let's just see how it evolves. Let's wait until we cross that bridge. And that naivete, and it's educated naivete, is very, very dangerous. Back in 2004, Sumatra superquake and tsunami killed 250,000 people. And on that day, you had people that watched the water go out to sea, stranding all the fish, and they're sitting there thinking, well, Phyllis, let's get a basket and go get a free lunch. All right. Now, meanwhile, and those are the ones who are dying, the ones with the nice cars, dead animal skins on the wall, nice houses, so forth. All the ones that were seemingly the most intelligent people. So who are the ones that didn't die? Because they're the ones that did all the dying. So who didn't do all the dying? It was the ones that they looked down their nose at, stupid, ignorant natives who sit around the campfire and they hear stories when the great turtle shakes his back, You need to run to the hilltops because the great turtle is angry. Who cares what the logic is? When the tremors hit, what happened? The ignorant natives, with doing the great turtle hoochie coochie dance, were running uphill screaming, "Feet don't fail me now," and they all survived. And all of the educated people with the money in the cars who know better than anybody else, they drown like rats. Okay? And then a lot of people who lived in coastal areas, knowing those are dangerous areas, they met equal fates. All right? So the simple fact is, in the coming tribulation, am I trying to save everybody? No. Do I feel bad about the fact that 90% of the global population is going to perish? Of course I do. But instead of looking at the 90% that aren't going to make it, I'm looking at the 10% who are. And what can I do to help them, especially if they cannot afford to buy a hill of beans, like good little consumer survivors? What can I do to help them survive? And equally important, what can I do to help them help their loved ones to survive? Even the ones who are telling them, it's all nonsense. I don't want to hear about it. Nothing's going to happen. Denier's mantra. All right. Well, what I'm saying with survival wellness advocacy and the big win, this book is about making yourself incredibly useful to a survival community. The ones that are going to be able to mobilize quickly are going to be faith-based communities, spiritual-driven survivors. And we're going to know when we have this very last window of opportunity. It's going to be in your face and easy to see. Because, people always say, when am I going to see it with my own two eyes? Those are the people who are going to be in the 90% who die, drown like rats. All right? That's it. When you say, I want to see it with my own two eyes, you might as well just say, I want to drown to death. I want to die terribly. Thank you. Because the only right question is and 10% of the people are going to ask the right question. That is going to be, am I looking at something with my own two eyes that is a clear and present danger? That's the smart question. Everybody else just says, I want to see it. That's tourism. So what are the tourists going to do? They're going to run to MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and so forth. It was hysterical. We watched Trump a few days ago, gave a conference, and he just humiliated CNN. He called CNN fake news. He's absolutely right. And what you're going to see on these corporatist-controlled news channels is, when we see this in the sky, they're going to bring out the experts, and the experts are going to go, it's just going to be an interesting light show. That's all. Don't worry about it.
Can I jump in real quick on that, Marshall?
Pardon?
Can I jump in on that real quick about the light show that you're talking about? Because I see a lot of stuff lately on the mainstream news pointing to Planet 9. And then even Caltech's really pushing how researchers find evidence of a real ninth planet, according to the Caltech papers. Michael Brown, the guy that basically one of the big writers and discoverers of this Planet 9 that talks about it, he's also the same guy that wrote a book called How I Killed Pluto. And all of this subliminally, in my opinion, of the Planet 9. Okay, you can't call it Planet X. You got to call it Planet 9 because Pluto's downgraded. I can see why they downgraded Pluto. I get it. And then at the same time, it almost seems as if this is orchestrated at a certain level to cause a disassociation. There was an article that I read the other day that said a star is heading towards us, and it made it sound like the end of the world was going to happen because the star is heading towards us so fast. Well, if you read the actual paper, there's a 1 in 10,000 chance this thing is going to get within 100 AU, astronomical units, from the sun within 1.5 million years. But the article makes it sound like, oh my gosh, so you click on it and then you're like, why did I just click on this? This was stupid. So I just see all of this being pushed out there, all of this promotion of lens flares and hysteria, to where if there is this Planet X out there that causes